Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Scott McCandless. It's the week of December 12th, and this is your Monday briefing. This week will feature the release of updated inflation figures, and on Friday at midnight, the current government funding plan will expire. But we're going to begin today with news that broke late last week regarding Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Joining me to walk through this development is Todd Metcalf and Mark Prater. Todd, Mark, welcome.
Morning, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Todd, let's start with you. Senator Sinema's news was that she's leaving the Democratic Party and becoming an independent. Can you talk about how this will affect power in the Senate?
The good news is, even though she is leaving the Democratic Party and registering as an independent in Arizona, is that she apparently is not abandoning the Democratic caucus in the Senate. So like Senators Angus King and Bernie Sanders from Maine and Vermont, respectively, they are both independents who caucus with Democrats. So Senator Sinema did make clear that she was going to be getting her committee assignments from the Democrats. So continuing to sort of align herself with the Democratic caucus in the Senate, even if not be as a registered Democrat. So the consequence is it doesn't really change the balance of power in any way. That they will still technically control 51 seats, and so they'll continue to have that outright majority that was guaranteed last week when Senator Warnock won. I think her principal motivation really is not about a shift in power in the Senate, but really about her concern about a primary challenge from the left that has been sort of, talked about for quite some time. Ruben Gallego, a member of Congress from Arizona, has indicated he will primary her and has been raising significant amounts of money for that. So I think this really was sort of to posture her in a way to avoid perhaps what could be a difficult, if not, fatal, frankly, Democratic primary.
Interesting. Thanks, Todd. Mark, let's turn to you. What might this mean for businesses and for companies? If it doesn't necessarily alter balance in the Senate, what might it mean for the business community?
So, Scott, Senator Sinema played a decisive role in scaling back or eliminating tax increases that were largely agreed to by other Democrats, especially on individuals and pass-through businesses. Her rationale was laid out in an Arizona Chamber of Commerce event last spring, where she said she would support only tax increases that, quote, promote economic growth and economic stability, close quote, and would not support any tax policies that would, quote, put a brake on that type of economic growth or stall business and personal growth for America's industries, close quote. Senator Sinema specifically identified a corporate rate increase as problematic. She said policies should promote growth and economic stability, and she would not support policies that didn't meet that test.
Yeah, makes sense.
Her views are relevant, although, as Todd noted, there's a Democratic majority. Mm-hmm. Her party switch does, however, buttress her independent streak, since she doesn't have to run in the Democratic primary. And that should allow her to even more independence in terms of these tax policy issues.
Makes sense. Mark, thank you. Maybe we could turn back to an issue that we mentioned at the very top. And Todd, let's go to you for this. What exactly is the outlook for this spending bill? Like we said, on Friday, the current deal runs out. Where do things stand with government funding?
Well, it's sort of one of those good news, bad news situations, I'm afraid, Scott. I think that the good news is Senator Leahy and Congresswoman DeLauro, the chairs of the appropriations committees in the Senate and House, respectively, signaled sort of over the weekend that there had been some progress made. And so they weren't going to go ahead with what they planned to do, which is introducing a Democrats-only omnibus spending measure today. So the good news is there's been some progress made. The bad news is, even though there's been some progress, they have not reached a critical decision on that top line number. So there's still a chasm between where Democrats and Republicans are on the overall top line number, most particularly the ratio between defense and non-defense spending. They're going to need to reach that agreement soon if there's any hope for having an omnibus. They still have the opportunity, because funding does run out Friday. They could do another short-term CR to perhaps the end of next week, the following week, I should say, the 23rd, and maybe sort of cobble something together before that runs out. But if they're going to do that, they're really going to need to reach that agreement on a top line this week. So this is a critical week to that process. We'll just have to continue watching. But if they're unable to reach an agreement there, the question really then becomes: do they do a full year continuing resolution, level funding for the full year, or do they punt it sometime into the first or second quarter of next year, creating sort of a second bite at the apple on government funding after the Republicans have taken over the House? We'll just have to wait and see. But again, they said they've made progress. We'll just have to see how much they have made.
And Mark, for you, what about some of the tax items here? Wither their fate? There are a variety of them. Do they have a chance to get into a year-end package? And if not, when might we see action on them?
So Scott, as Todd said, the negotiators need to reach this agreement on the top line number, or there won't be any avenue for the tax package. So that is the first kind of issue to consider. Secondly, if they do reach agreement on the top line number, then they have to work out the scope of the tax package. As you can imagine, there are kind of regular extenders and other issues we've talked about, such as the tax cuts and jobs related offsets, R&D amortization, 163J, bonus, et cetera. But then Democrats are asking for balance because those are TCJA related, and the parties would need to agree on what does that balance mean. Is it just the child tax credit, or is it other working families relief measures? They have to work through that. As you said, if they can't reach agreement on the top line number, and as Todd mentioned, then probably the likely thing is a short-term CR that would run out probably in the first quarter at some point, and that in effect kicks the can down the road on resolution of these issues.
And perhaps the ironic upside to a short-term continuing resolution is it might give a chance for the tax items to be resuscitated early in 23, and maybe there's a glimmer of hope there.
That's right, and that may be, and that's a possibility.
Sure.
So we'll have to see this week. As Todd said, we're at a critical juncture here to see how the negotiations go on this top line number.
Oh, that's great. Mark and Todd, thank you both very much for setting us up for this very big week. Appreciate your insights as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for having
us. Be here.
And for our viewers, we have a number of great episodes coming your way, starting with an interview with former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Be sure to check it out, along with a number of other episodes we filmed at this year's Global Tax Symposium. Getting policy on demand through email is easier than ever. Just click on the QR code at the end of this episode, or click on the link in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and stay tuned for more.